Closing the loop is completing the cycle, and end is the beginning. To end, returned to rest. Welcome to GisselleOS 8. This is episode 5 of the Great Lock-In, and we've got 67 days left to go until the end, which is January 30th. Here's the recap of my week. This week, the first half was spent cleaning and organizing my mental and physical space. Because of that, I did have extra time to listen to new videos on YouTube that I will be recommending in the caption and also later in this video. The second half was focused on fleshing out the game plan for the rest of 2025. So it feels great to be back in motion and have a clear picture of what the rest of the challenge is going to look like. On the business end, I now have an itemized list of deliverables for the rest of the challenge, so I know what it's going to look like as well as when it's going to happen. And through this process, I realized that the goal is the end result of what you're doing. So if you want to reverse engineer your goal, figure out what you want, you can reverse engineer a goal from what you want and how to get there. Work on the scale that you want to achieve. That's part of the process, is just executing as best as you can at that moment, but balancing pace with execution. It might not land, but that feedback is at least closer to reality than something that is perfected and released over a long time, or an unclear message that isn't truly representative of what you're trying to create. So think from the perspective that you want to see. Create the world around you based on what you want to see, and from that you can extract what perspective you need to create from in order to get there. Thinking and seeing are two different experiences. Before you see it, you will think it. Your thought can bring you to seeing it in your physical reality. So on the business end, I got clear on my deliverables beginning midweek. And in that process also came a new system that I'm exploring to track my actions based on when they need to happen. And so I repurposed one of my monitors. I used to use both frequently when I was programming, but now I found myself using just one monitor, so the other one is usually not plugged in. So I'm using it as a dynamic calendar so I can see what needs to be done for today exactly, tomorrow, the following week, as far as to a week ahead. So when today finishes, I'm going to have my tasks up for today in a week. My first time doing this, so we'll see what happens. So it comes from that. And as I was making that, I then had the idea of creating an analog and digital space, and just how our digital devices engage with our physical world, how we engage with them in the physical world, and how it can take us away from the physical world when you spend your time consuming rather than creating and actually moving forward in your life, just staying complacent and comfortable through what feels familiar or what feels nice, which can be spending your time entertained. These things have positives and negatives, but I am seeing the way that my digital devices interrupt and interact with my analog activities like journaling, letter writing, and just having to switch between my keyboard setup to a paper setup and then cleaning up my papers after can be a mess. So I am thinking for future self, creating 2 different spaces, one that's dedicated to letter writing, just paper activities, and then one that I can dedicate to my computer and monitors. On the personal end, I'm learning about dynamic systems theory and neuroscience. These 2 topics I would not have thought I was interested in. They have been recommended to me on the YouTube algorithm, and this is a product of me intentionally engaging with the content that I'm consuming. And so even though I didn't have the terminology for these fields myself, I was able to come across them because I'm consuming content that is aligned with that. I have really been enjoying these topics. I've really enjoyed studying these topics. Part of that is probably my affinity for definitions and understanding concepts and how they interact with each other. This is what systems do, is take something concrete like our physical reality and flatten it down into a way that we can talk about it in just variables and conditions. And And that's exactly what the videos I watched were about this week. I'm going to include them in the caption. I'll briefly go over the concepts that I think are applicable and I find parallels between how we make decisions and the outcomes of them, and how neurons fire and the systems that they exist in, which is phase space. As I watched those videos, they introduced the idea of producing a personal structure from a creative rhythm. So shaping your life around your creative rhythm and using that interest as a stable way to return to yourself. That's what I was leading into from the beginning quote, is the return to rest. That is part of completing the cycle. For me, it begins with the creative process, creating, feeding my process, that in turn feeds me. Then to balance both, I have to stay up with my well-being, meaning getting enough rest, sleep, and also the sources of food. I'm also at a cross point in my personal life where I'm faced with many decisions. The decision I'm making is between stability and freedom, or that's how I initially saw it. And as I further explored that, I realized that they are not independent of each other. Freedom exists with stability. Without stability, freedom is an instance. It's not something that can develop because it's a free float rather than structure that can be built upon. And that's how I am making this decision. I think I'm kind of like in the middle of that, is with the idea that by introducing stability, I will have less flexibility, but in the long term, that allows me consistency. I did some thinking on structure and consistency and what that looks like with a personal rhythm. And for me, that's where that creative process comes in. As long as I allow myself the space to create without restriction, I'm hoping that I'll be able to keep up a faster rhythm. We'll see. This is an exploration phase, but it's one of the conditions that allowed me to create a plan for the rest of up until February 2026 is having my time blocked out minute by minute, but then that's with structure. So yeah, that's what I'm using the sticky notes on my monitor for, to track that timeline, those deliverables, based on my creative rhythm, but on a weekly cycle. So it is bound to time now. And for the media of the week, I have got 3 separate videos. I will be including them in the caption. My hope with these is just to introduce new perspectives, concepts, ideas into your awareness, to empower you with new ways to see the world, and to challenge how you might currently understand the world and the expansive ways that we can apply concepts across fields. So the first video is the game theory of social media. It is a dense video. I had spoke about that I think 2 videos ago. Is social engineering social media. It's a system, you can hack it, and this creator broke it down to who the players are in the game, what game you're playing, and how to create the impact that you're looking for. The second video is the geometry of neural computation. This video explores how neurons fire as a system within phase space, which shows how an input moves through all possibilities. And what I took away from that, some parallels that I found, especially right now where I find myself at a decision point, is that the outcome of your frequency, wherever the energy is on the phase space, is bound by the domain. Whatever the phase space looks like is the carved out possibilities for the path that it can take. So if you want to change the path that the input takes, you change the phase space, which is known as a bifurcation, a change of the phase space portrait, meaning that based on whatever conditions have been changed, the way that the energy moves, the path is changed. The bifurcations can happen by increasing and decreasing the voltage And I just saw parallels around how systems, because it's a representation of a dynamic system, how systems can loop the same frequency, which is why it's taking the same path. So you're using energy, but you're not getting anywhere. There's different firing patterns, but that's one that I saw parallel of. Your result is based on the probability in your current domain. Where you are now, what is probable is what's going to get you there, but you need to change your location in order to change where you are. That means doing things differently from the perspective of where you want to be. There is a basin of attraction. So this is an area where if the energy is not enough, where it can go outside of the domain and complete a cycle and fire, it goes into the basin of attraction. And this basin of attraction, I think, just represents when you do things at a lower energy, you are using energy, but you're bound to a certain outcome within that range. You have to put in extra energy to make it outside of that basin of attraction to complete the cycle. Your outcome exists in the domain of probability. So energy is acting within a dynamic system. How neurons fire with high unstable energy, it can lead the neuron to consistently firing, never going to rest, unless it is interrupted with the bifurcation. So it either loops in that basin of attraction where it's bound, or at a lower voltage can make one loop but will go to rest. And the range of that domain is much smaller because it's lower voltage. That input moves within the space can be changed by making a qualitative change to the phase space. So you can change the input and you can change the conditions of where that input acts. That's what I took away from those 3 videos. Feel free to watch them. I would love to hear what thoughts anyone might have from those. And that concludes my video. I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you next week.